good evening. I hope everything is good this Sunday evening, and today we thought we would start with a song.
Yes, indeed. This is a song by Bill and Belle Reed called The Old Lady and the Devil. It's quite appropriate to tonight's theme.
There was an old lady went whistling over the hill, said the devil won't have me, and I don't know who else, saying bye.
Whoops.
Diddle-lie,
My sound was on mute.
diddle-lie.
Oh well,
An old
let's
man
take
left
that.
foot of the hill, if he ain't moved away,
Oh,
he's
dear.
living there still singing bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie, day. He hitched up his hogs and went out to plow. How he got around, we never knew how, singing bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie,
I've been distracted
day.
while I was
Old devil
tweeting the
come
screen.
to him to field one day, saying one of your family I'm gonna
Yeah.
take away, saying bye. Diddle-lie, bye,
Multitasking and everything, isn't that what we say?
Take her on with the joy of my heart. I hope by golly you'll never part, singing bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie, day.
Get it on.
Old devil got her all up on his back. He looked like a peddler with a hump on his back, singing bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie, day. Old devil got to the forks of the road. He said, old lady, you're a hell of a load, singing bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie, day. Old devil got to the gates of hell, said, punch a bar up, we'll scorch you well, singing bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie, day. Out come a little devil, a dragging a chain. She picked up a hatchet and split out his brain, saying bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie, day. Out come a little devil, a skating on the wall, said, take her back, daddy, she's a murdering us all, singing bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie, day. Little devil was peeping out the crack, said, take her on, daddy, don't you bring her back, singing bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie, day. The old man was a-peeping out the crack. He see the old devil come wagging her back, singing bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie, day. The old man lay sick in the bed. She up with a butter stick and paddled his head, saying bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie, day. The old lady went whistling over the hill, said the devil won't have me, and I don't know who else, saying bye. Diddle-lie, bye, diddle-lie, day. Now you see see what a woman can do, she can outdo the devil and the old man who sent fire. Diddle-I, diddle-I, fire, diddle-I, diddle-I, day. The old lady went whistling over the hill, said the devil won't have it, I don't know who else sent fire. Diddle-I, diddle-I, fire, diddle-I, diddle-I, day. The old man was peeping out the crack, he see the old devil come wagging her back, saying fire. Diddle-I, diddle-I, fire, diddle-I, diddle-I, day. The old man lay sick in the bed, she up with a butter stick and patted his head, saying fire. Diddle-I, diddle-I, fire, diddle-I, diddle-I, day. Now you see what a woman can do, she can outdo the devil and the old man do stand fire. Diddle-I, diddle-I, fire, diddle-I, diddle-I, day.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Yep. We just tweeted out the DLive and YouTube links. So please do share that to anyone who hasn't got them. How's everyone doing?
Welcome everybody.
Yeah.
I hope everyone is having a good Sunday evening, and yeah, please share the link. And thank you so much for Jody K in sharing our stream and sending people over. It is good to have everyone here.
Yes, it is indeed.
Yeah, and a lovely lady she is, that Jody K.
Yeah, we'd highly recommend you go and watch her stuff.
Yeah,
Great
definitely.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you want the DLive link? I will get that in just a second.
Sound is a bit choppy. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to eat my mic again.
Oh dear.
If it's not one thing, then it's the other. Or I might just try to speak up a bit. I tend to... Oh, it's a bit of interference. Okay, I will try to unplug and replug the mic. Just give me 1 second.
Whose voice is fine, Watch Rider? Is that mine again? Oh, hello new followers. Hi Ragnar, Stephen O. Das Duke. Yeah, mine's fine. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Well, and we got like 4 or 5 new followers in a row. That's great. Love it. Thank you.
Okay. I am back. I hope the sound is a bit better now.
Well, we will carry on with the stream. Anyways, and
Yeah.
still a bit choppy. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I really don't know what to do about that. I'm still waiting for a bit more equipment for it, and it might be better when we get that. Hear me at all?
I think they can, yes. Oh, Fearless Bear's hosting. Thank you, Fearless Bear. Thank you. Ragnar reckons it might be the lead. Well, today's show is about devils and smiths. Oh, that is a lemon storm. You're right. Thank you, Dishrag. And Fearless Bear.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Yes.
We had a question in the YouTube chat what this stream is about. We are reading the old folk tales, and then we are discussing them.
Yes.
So, yeah, we are looking into the old traditions of Europe.
And today is certainly a very
Yeah.
old one indeed. It is about the devil and smith archetype, which is, they reckon, one of the oldest archetypes within tales. There's tales from all around the world about divine smiths and, engaging in bargains with the devil or some sort of evil entity. Usually their soul is at stake, but usually the smith manages to trick the devil with some sort of gift that the devil has bestowed on them in return for their soul, and thus actually avoid the taking of their soul and going to hell or the underworld or wherever. Some of the stories today specifically do involve devils and smiths. I thought it would be a good episode to tell the story of Wayland the Smith, which is quite a gory one, but he's a very important smith in British mythology, in Anglo-Saxon mythology. So that's the sort of stuff that we have lined up today, and you can tell when a story is older than a lot of our civilizations and when it's Proto-Indo-European by looking at where it is found in the world and in the continent of Europe. And basically, if you find multiple stories of a similar nature in places which would not, they would not have been connected by trade, then it's likely what you've got is a story that precedes all of those places ever existing. And so it goes back really far. It goes back to when we were coming out of the sort of steppes, and it's a sort of Proto-Indo-European story, and a lot of the Smith stories do fit that sort of definition. Yes, crossroads do come into it, actually. Yes, I do think.
Yeah, it will, but maybe a bit later, at least.
Indeed, yes. Crossroads might feature sort of a bit later on. They're definitely sort of associated with these type of tales. But for now, I'm gonna play a very basic sort of Smith and Devil one. It probably fits the archetype maybe the best. And that is the tale of St. Dunstan and the Devil. St. Dunstan and the Devil. In days of yore, when saints were plenty, for each one now you'd then find 20, in Glaston's fruitful vale, St. Dunstan had his dwelling snug, warm as that inmate of a rug, named in no polished tale. The holy man, when not employed at prayers or meals or work, enjoyed with anvil, forge, and sledge. These he provided in his cell with saintly furniture as well, so chroniclers allege. The peaceful mattock, ploughshare, spade, sickle, and pruning hook he made, eschewing martial labours. Thus bees will rather honey bring, than hurtfully employ their sting in warfare for their neighbours. A cheerful saint, too, oft would he mellow old time with minstrelsy, but such as gave no scandal. Than his was never harp more famed, for Dunstan was the blacksmith named harmonious by Handel. And when with tuneful voice he sang, his well-strung harp's melodious twang, accompaniment lending, So sweetly wedded were the twain, the chords flowed mingled with the strain, mellifluently blending. Now 'tis well known, mankind's great foe oft lurks and wanders to and fro in ballywicks and shires, scattering broadcast his mischief seeds, planting the germs of wicked deeds, choking fair shoots with poisonous weeds, till goodness nigh expires. Well, so it chanced this tramping vagrant, intent on villainies most flagrant, ranged by St. Dunstan's gate, and hearing music so delicious, like hooded snake his spleen malicious swelled up with envious hate, thought Nick, I'll make his harp a fool, I'll push him from his music stool. Then skulking near the saint, the vilest jars Nick loudly sounded, of brayings, neighings, screams compounded. How the musician's ears were wounded, not Hogarth e'en could paint. The devil fancied it rare fun. Well, don't you like my second done? 2 parts sound better sure than one, said he with a queer grimace. Come sing away, indeed you shall, strike up a spicy madrigal, and hear me do the bass, this chafing Dunstan could not brook. He clenched his fist, he crabbed his look, betrayed his irritation. 'Twas nuts for Nick's derisive jaw, who fairly chuckled when he saw the placid saint's vexation. Au revoir, friend, adieu till noon. Just now you are rather out of tune. Your visage is too sharp, your ear perhaps a trifle flat. When I return, all round my hat, we'll have upon the harp a tale I know has gone about, that Dunstan twinged him by the snout with pincers hotly glowing, levying by fieri facias tweak a diabolical screech and squeak, no tender mercy showing. But antiquarians, the most curious, reject that vulgar tale as spurious. His reverence, they say, instead of giving the nose a pull, resolved on vengeance just and full upon some future day. Dunstan the saying called to mind, the devil through his paw behind alone shall penal torture find from iron, lead, or steel. Achilles thus had been eternal, thanks to his baptism infernal, but for his mortal heel. And so the saint by wisdom guided to fix old Clooty's hoof decided, with horseshoe of real metal, and iron nails quite unmistakable, for Dunstan now had become implacable, resolved Nick's hash to settle. Satan of this without forewarning, worse luck for him, the following morning, would simper sauntered in, squinted at what the saint was doing, but never smoked the mystery brewing. Putting his foot in't, soon the shoeing, the holy smith did begin. Oh, 'twas worth coin to see him seize that ugly leg and twixt his knees, firmly the pastern grasp. The shoe he tried on, burning hot, his tools all handy he had got, hammer and nails and rasp. A startled stare the devil lent, much wondering what St. Dunstan meant, this preluding to follow. But the first nail from the hammer's stroke, full soon Nick's silent wonder broke, for his shrill scream might then have woke the sleepiest of Sleepy Hollow, and distant echo heard the sound, vexing the hills for leagues around, but answer would not render. She may not thus her lips profane, so shadow, fearful of a stain, avoids the black offender. The saint no pity had on Nick, but drove long nails right through the quick. Louder shrieked he, and faster. Dunstan cared not, his bitter grin without mistake showed farther sin he had found a ruthless master. And having driven, clenched, and filed, the saint reviewed his work and smiled with cruel satisfaction, and jeering said, "Pray ere you go, dance me the pas seul named Jim Crow, with your most graceful action, to tell how horny yelled and cried, and all the artful tricks he tried to ease his tribulations, would fill a bigger book than ever author undertook since the Book of Lamentations. His tale's short, quick, convulsive coils told of more pain than all of Job's boils, when Satan brought with subtle toils Job's patience to the scratch. For sympathetic tortures spread from hoof to tail, from tail to head, all did the anguish catch. And yet, though seemed his sharp correction stereotyped in Satan's recollection, as in his smarting hocks, not until he the following deed had signed and sealed, St. Dunstan freed the vagabond from the stocks. To all good folk in Christendom, to whom this instrument shall come, the devil sendeth greeting. Know ye that for himself and heirs devil covenants and declares that never at morn or evening prayers, at chapel, church, or meeting, never where concords of sweet sound, sacred or social, flow around, or harmony is wooed, nor where the horseshoe meets his sight on land or sea, by day or night, on lowly sill or lofty pinnacle, on bowsprit, helm, mast, boom, or binnacle, said devil will intrude the horseshoe now said's keel and roof from visitors of this rover's hoof. The emblem seemed preventing. He wrecks the bond, but more the pain. The nails went so against the grain, the rasp was so tormenting. He will not through Granada much, for there he knows the horseshoe arch at every gate attends him, nor partridges can he digest, since the dire horseshoe on the breast most grievously offends him. The name of Smith he cannot bear, Smith Paine he'll curse and foully swear. That Smith of Pennsylvania, with looks so wild about the face, Monroe called in, pronounced the case clear anti-Smithymania, and duly certified that Nick should be confined as lunatic, fit subject for commission. But who the deuce would like to be the devil's person's committee, so kindred won't petition? Now since the wicked fiend's at large, skippers and housekeepers, I charge you all to heed my warning. Over your threshold on your mast, be sure the horseshoe's nailed fast, protecting and adorning. Here note if humorists by trade on waistcoat had the shoe displayed, lampoon's sour spirit might be laid, and cease its spiteful railing. Whether the humour chanced to be joke, pun, quaint ballad, repartee, slang, or bad spelling, we should see good humour still prevailing. And oh, if equity as well as Nisi Prius would not sell reason's perfection ever to wrangling suitors sans horseshoe, lawyers would soon have naught to do, their subtle efforts ceasing to reason from right to sever, while mu the symbol wears tant mieux, repelling sinful aid to brew his liquid strains XX. Still, I advise strong drinks beware, no horseshoe thwarts the devil there, or demon mischief checks. And let me read you, Mr. Barry, not all your aunts of John, Dick, Harry, Plantagenet, or Tudor, not your projections or your niches, affluent of crowns and sculptile riches, will scare the foul intruder. He'll care not for your harp or whistle, nor lion, horse, rose, shamrock, thistle, horned head, or honey sweat, nor puppy griffs, though doubtless meant young senators to represent like Samson armed with jaw. Only consult your sober senses, and ponder well the consequences, if in some moment evil the old sinner should take the speaker's chair, make Blackrod fetch the nobles there, and with them play the devil. Then do not fail, great architect, assembled wisdom to protect from Satan's visitation. With horseshoe fortify each gate, each lion's paw, and then the state is safe from ruination. So yes, that was St. Dunstan and the Devil. Now, I think there's probably some very specific 1800s references in there, of which I will explain a little bit more, just to make sure, indeed, that everyone's getting what he's trying to imply when he's using that more descriptive, metaphorical language. Yeah, I do agree, Ragnar. This sort of stuff should genuinely be taught in schools. There should be a lot more focus on folklore in literature. There's so much of it. There's such a body of work that, to be honest, I had never heard anything of in the education system, but that is why we're here. We're here to educate people on the rich folk traditions of Europe.
Indeed we are. We want to keep our old traditions alive, and for that we have to tell the stories and talk about them. We did have a question of what your accent is.
What my accent is?
If you want to share. Yeah, if you want to share.
It's sort of a nothing accent, to be honest. It's Northern England, heavily influenced by relatives from South England. It sort of ends up being mostly southern with like tinges of northern, and it changes dependent upon situation. It's just a very generic English accent. English accent is what it is. Like, I grew up in Northern England. I don't consider myself to be Southern, but a lot of people from the North, they think I sound like it.
Yes, I'm not versed enough in English accents to say really, so. But it is quite similar to what I assume to be English as a foreigner, so I quite like it.
I mean, yeah, it gets me stick sometimes in certain parts of the country to being posh, and then in other parts of the country it's regarded as entirely normal, if not slightly common. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a neutral accent you can fit in well enough anywhere, and I'm grateful for that sometimes, definitely. It can be difficult sometimes if you have a very distinctive sort of English accent or UK regional accent to make yourself understood sometimes, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, and as a foreigner, some can be a bit hard to understand.
Yeah, I've had to translate regional accents for the benefit of non-native English speakers before now.
Yeah. Okay, so should we dive into Wayland?
Thanks for the ice cream dish rag, by the way. Thank you very much for all your donations this stream. Yes, we could have Wayland the Smith right now, if you would want. Or should we have one of your stories to kind of alternate them?
Oh, I thought talking about the story we just heard.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, we have... Wait, that wasn't Wayland the Smith. Yeah.
I'm
what is
sorry.
My brain doing?
It's too...
Yeah, so this is St. Dunstan and the Devil.
Yeah, that was it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Too many titles to keep track of today.
Yeah. So yeah, St. Dunstan and the Devil is a traditional Christian story, but it seems to have influence from stuff that's really quite old. I mean, this particular version is from 1871. This is the third edition of this poem from 1871, and let me just check the author. Yes, it is written by a guy called Edward G. Flight, and he's done previous two editions of this. Now, we have sort of a few obscure references here. One that he makes is to William Hogarth. So in case anybody didn't understand, not Ian Hogarth could paint. Hogarth's a portraiture artist, but also a very versatile artist, painting satire to the point where he has his own satirical style named after him, Hogarthian. And he sort of made references there as well to a couple of legal terms. Fieri facias is just a judgment obtained in a legal action for debt or damages for the sheriff to levy on goods of the judgment debtor. So it's a carrying out of a legal action. And they refer to, in the poem, another version of this story where the devil tries to trick St. Dunstan by coming along looking like a pretty maiden, but he spots the cloven hooves on the devil untransformed, and he grabs the devil's nose with a pair of red-hot pincers. So that is another version of this story that there is out there. But he says that's a bit too vulgar for a saint. So one of the most interesting references is probably the devil being averse to iron, lead, and steel. So that has quite a bit of deeper meaning to it, actually, because we have lead. That is a metal symbolic of death and also transformation. So that's a metal that represents impurities, obviously, but when you burn it, it's sort of metaphoric with cleansing and removal of imperfections. So you have that, which the devil apparently can't tolerate. And then you have iron, which has always been a traditional protective metal. Aggression and growth and protection. It's seen as kind of the most human sort of metal. And it's kind of vulgar, but it gets the sort of protection job done. And steel, obviously, being always associated with strength. And you've certainly with iron, I know there's a big history, pre-Christian as well, with iron and salt being used to ward off evil, probably because of associations with weaponry. I mean, I know salt is antibacterial, and there's always been certain associations of iron being used in protective rituals. Now, he's talking about how he's nailed the horseshoe, and when they refer to the pastern, he's grasping the pastern between his knees. That's just the sloping part of the horse's foot between the fetlock and the hoof, and of course the devil has that because he has horse legs. And then, the fetlock's just the joint of a quadruped's leg. I kind of like this poem for the wordplay that it has in it, because when you look at it, you just learn about another 1800s thing, or he has a lot of references also to literature and classics, like the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. He makes a reference to could have wrote the sleepiest of Sleepy Hollow, and that's a Gothic story by American author Washington Irving about Ichabod Crane, which everybody should probably check out. And of course he makes references to echo, not wanting to shout, not wanting to repeat this din that the devil is making. In case anybody doesn't know, Echo is someone who upsets Zeus's wife, Hera, by consorting with Zeus. Echo tried to protect Zeus, as he'd ordered her to do, and endured Hera's wrath, and therefore Hera made her only able to speak the last words spoken to her. So when she met Narcissus and fell in love with him, she was unable to tell him how she felt, and she was actually forced to watch him as he fell in love with himself. So you got this guy who's clearly very educated. He's writing this for an audience of people who are of a certain class, and they know classics. And he seems to be using it as satire as well. Oh, a pastule is a dance to one person, and when the devil makes reference to All Around My Hat, that is of course a folk song as covered by the band Steel Eye Span, actually. Yes. Yeah, he does have goat's legs. I meant to say goat's legs. But yeah, so he's then going on to describe the adoption of horseshoes as a protective symbol in a whole bunch of cultures and countries, including in Spain, where they build them into buildings in the shape of arches.
We have them here as well, and I've never heard the origin of why horseshoe should be lucky. So that was very interesting to learn.
Yeah, I mean, it might have an older explanation for it, but this is the sort of first time that I've come across as well. Why exactly is a horseshoe lucky? Why would they keep the devil away? And that's why I thought this was an interesting little poem. That would make sense.
Definitely.
Devils just got horseshoe associated trauma. But yeah. So apparently they
well,
do...
he seems to have had quite a bit of dealings with Smiths over the years, so
he does.
He might be a bit traumatized.
He does. He doesn't tend to go near many metal workshops anymore.
No.
He's learned his lesson regarding that.
Yeah. Yeah. There is one interesting connection I would like to make when it comes to Smiths. In the Bible, there is a Smith called Tubal-Cain, and he is found in Genesis. He is a descendant of Cain, brother, the one who killed Abel. And he has a sister who some claim are the wife of Noah. And there is speculation that she became the mother of demons, which is quite interesting. But Tubal-Cain, he was the first Smith and their protector, and all of his brothers also were in the creative parts, dealing with singing and painting and everything. So that is a very interesting connection. It is one of the very few names we have before the flood.
That must be extremely old then, yeah. But yeah,
I found one theory that what we can learn from scripture in that is that God used the descendants of the disobedient Cain to impact history through discoveries, inventions, art, and industry. That was the grace of God and how his descendants were able to redeem themselves. And I found that quite an interesting connection.
That is actually. I hadn't actually heard that before.
No, neither had I. But I will admit I'm not that well versed in Christianity, so I know, of course, all of the big happenings, but the more obscure characters I don't really know much about. So that was very interesting to learn.
It's something I need to look more into myself, because I think there's a rich network of symbology in there. Definitely. Yeah, but I think this poem is not just the story of St. Dunstan. I think this guy is trying to use it for some sort of satire, because he keeps making references to 1800s contemporary things like John Monroe, who was a madness doctor, as they called him in them days, who lived in the 1700s, treating the devil. And he's then sort of taking the horseshoe into the territory where he says that comedians could wear one to keep their humour from ranging into the nasty. And Nisi Prius, that's a legal term. And he has a whole verse about how horseshoes would put lawyers out of business. But he also says that, a horseshoe can't protect you against the evils of drinking. But that a horseshoe might be good to put on like all of the sort of outsides of Parliament and all around the buildings of state. I think that's sort of what the last verse is referring to. So he's going on extolling the virtues of the horseshoe in basically every situation from what I can get of these references. And I think that the horseshoe has ended up being a metaphor for something. I think it's maybe ended up being a metaphor for good sense. Something that can protect you in nearly every situation, which is diminished by alcohol. Because he's certainly at some point he's not just talking about a horseshoe there. I think.
Yeah. It seems more like a stand-in, I would say. And if it's one thing alcohol diminishes, it's definitely good sense.
Yes, and I think possibly that this poem was written with possibly happenings of his time very specifically in mind. And there's possibly a lot that modern audience...
It was from the 1800s, wasn't it? Late 1800s?
Yes, it was from the very late 1800s. It was 1875.
At least in Norway and America, there was quite a bit of problem with drinking at that time, and combined with the Puritans gave way to the movement against alcohol, and ultimately ended in the prohibition in the US. Here in Norway, we have had very strict rules on alcohol since that time. So it might be something that was a bit more widespread that I don't know about at the moment.
I think there was a lot of talk among the Victorians and thereafter about the evils of drink. I don't think that America and Norway were the only ones talking about it. I just don't think that fully banning alcohol was likely to ever take off in Britain. I think we like a pint a bit too much for that. Yeah.
The temperance movement it was, I think, years ago. I definitely don't think it was just the US and Norway. I do suspect that it was maybe all around Europe and our foundling states, seedling states. So it's definitely colored by times, and that is something that often happens with tales, that they are put in a new setting that is very close to their own. I read one story tale that had been adapted. I don't remember what it was called, but it was being set in modern New York, of all places. So, that happens all of the time.
That's true. No, it seems very likely, especially given that this is a Christian poem, that he's connected maybe with the temperance movement.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so.
But he's certainly, I think the St. Dunstan story seems to be one that will go back a long time, possibly predating the existence of St. Dunstan. We might have had a story similar to that there could have been there, because it's clearly a very old archetype, linking back to a few sort of really old protective rituals.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, I guess we should have one of your stories next, Lynx.
Okay, we could go with The Boy and the Devil.
Yes,
That is a
we'll go with
short,
that.
sweet one. Yeah.
Hello, Lynx.
I'm sorry, I thought you had a recording of that. Oh, okay. Then I will get it up. Just give me a little minute. Do you want me to read it or do you want a recording very quickly? Okay. There we go. The Boy and the Devil. Once upon a time, there was a boy who was cracking nuts while walking down a road. Then he found a worm-eaten nut, and shortly thereafter, the devil himself appeared. Is it true what they say? The boy asked. That you can make yourself so small you can walk through the eye of a needle? Why, yes it is, answered the devil. Oh, let me see, let me see. Climb into this nut through the wormhole. The devil agreed, made himself small, and crept inside. As soon as he was in the nut, the boy closed the hole with a small stick and put the nut in his pocket. Now I have you, he thought. He continued down the road and soon came to a forge. He walked inside and asked the smith if he could crack the nut for him. Yes, put it on the anvil there, answered the smith. And the boy did so, while the smith got the smallest hammer. He hit the nut, but it did not crack. He tried a bigger hammer, but still the nut was whole. So he got an even bigger hammer. But that didn't work either. The nut was still in one piece. The smith grew angry, saying, I shall crack you yet, and got out his big sledgehammer and hit it with all his might. The nut cracked. I don't think we have any sound. And blew off half the roof of the forge. The noise was so loud, as if the whole forge would fall down. I think the devil was in that nut, said the smith. Yes, he was, the boy answered.
So that was the story of the boy and the devil. Yes, we do have sound. Good.
Okay.
Good. Yeah. So that's an interesting one. So, Lynx, what was your sort of thoughts on reading that and the possible meanings behind it that you found?
Well, first of all, it is a story of quite a cheeky little boy. How many boys would, or girls for that matter, would act in that way when they meet the devil, trapping in, I can't speak, trapping him in a nut. So, but also it's quite bold that I think he can, trap and get rid of the devil. So he is acting on behalf of good. He wants to defeat the devil and everything. So, of course, he does know that the smithy is just down the road, and he promptly goes there, and might not know the consequences of it. Because I doubt that he was planning on blowing the smithy up. So,
I'm not sure that it's generally a great idea to trap the devil in a confined space. He's going to be real angry when he gets out.
Yeah, and he might not be the hardest, the easiest to defeat in any matter, let alone trapping him in the knot and get cracked. Wouldn't he just be able to spring back out again? But yeah, mostly, of course, I was thinking of the main story, where it's the Smith and the devil who has their interaction. But a cheeky little version of that with the boy.
Yes, that's true.
Instead,
I think possibly it's maybe a small message, isn't it, about not biting off more than you can chew, perhaps.
Yeah. Like one of the stories I had for Halloween. Be bold, but be not too bold. That is that might be a lesson to keep in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have like 2 more stories, and your other one is a classic Smith and devil sort of archetype, and mine is just a Smith. We'd probably, I think, we could actually go with mine next and talk about Wayland a little bit.
Yeah.
Because he's not a Smith who has a dealing with the devil, but he's a very powerful semi-divine Smith in and of his own right, and I thought he was definitely worth a mention today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The Smithy on the Downs, Wayland the Smith, in Berkshire. Back in the days before Christianity came to these shores, the Saxon bards would delight in standing around a blazing fire, to tell elaborate tales of their gods and heroes. One can imagine the scene as one of these tales unfolded. The tale of Wayland the Smith. Wayland was the son of the great god giant, Wade, king of the Finns. When he was very young, his father sent him to be apprenticed to the greatest of master metal workers, the dwarves of the Icelandic mountains. Wayland learnt quickly, and as he grew up, he began to outshine even his tutors. When his apprenticeship came to an end, Wayland went to live with his 2 brothers, Egil and Slagfid, at their hunting lodge deep in the forest of Wolfdales. Every day the 3 brothers set out on their skates to go hunting. One particularly frosty morning, however, it was not a deer or a boar that they discovered in the wilderness, but 3 lovely princesses. These 3 beauties sat very quietly, spinning on the shores of Lake Wolfsere. Egil recognized them at once as being no ordinary royal ladies. They were swan maidens, who had flown in from Mirkwood. Their swan forms lay down by the water's edge. Creeping through the reeds, the 3 brothers seized these magical skins, and thus the maidens too, for without their avine halves, they were powerless to escape. Wayland and his brothers took the 3 princesses as their wives. Egil married Olrun, Slagvid married Swanwhite, and Wayland the beautiful Allwise. For 8 years they lived together in what appeared to be blissful happiness. But the Swan Maidens found it hard living in the mortal world, and finally their desire to fly once more became too great. While their husbands were out hunting one day, they stole back their bird forms, and flew away as suddenly as they had arrived. The brothers returned from their day's hunt to find their wives gone. Egil and Slagvid were distraught, and immediately packed up in search of their wives. Wayland, however, remained quite calm. He was sure his love would soon return, so he stayed in Wolfdales to wait for her, content for now to keep himself busy in his smithy. Wayland's metalwork had been well known before, but now he had time to concentrate on his craft. The pieces he produced became more and more superb. It was not long before his works were in demand the world over, sought by gods and kings alike. Especially prized was his fabulous jewellery. Rings were his speciality, and he kept a hoard of them strung up on a willow twig in his forge. Before long, Wayland was unable to keep up with the demand for his wares. Kings and princes vied to possess more and more of his handiwork, and envy was rife. Covetous eyes pored over the newly worked items that emerged from Wayland's forge, but the smith was not interested in the squabbles of mortals. He only wished to be left in peace to get on with his work. King Nidus of Sweden, however, had other ideas. He was consumed with envy every time anyone managed to purchase some of Wayland's merchandise before him. He decided that Wayland's great works were fit for no one outside the Swedish royal family. Nidus sent his agents out to spy on Wayland, and they soon returned to inform the king that Wayland lived alone in the forest. How foolish could he be? Nidus secretly set off for Wolfdales with a band of armed men. They arrived at Wayland's hunting lodge just as night was falling. The smith was still out hunting for his supper, so the king took an opportunity to have a poke around his magical home. On entering the lodge, however, he was instantly struck by the glare from all of Wayland's gold work in the smithy within. It was almost blinding, and the king was forced to cover his face. Nidus could not believe his squinting eyes. He had never seen such a splendid array of jewels and weaponry. He was particularly drawn to the ring blade and willow branch, though. Carefully he drew off the rings one by one and examined the intricate detail of their design. One was so incredibly fine that he could not bear to replace it. His daughter would love such a present, so he placed it in his pocket. Outside once more, King Nidus waited impatiently for Wayland's return, but spending hours doing nothing was not what the king was used to. Eventually he mounted his horse and returned to the palace, leaving his captain in charge of Wayland's capture. When the goldsmith finally did make his way home, the captain proceeded with caution. Wayland entered his house and stoked up the fire, ready to cook some of the bear he had just killed in the forest. In the flickering light of flames he noticed that one of his rings was missing. He knew every piece of his work, and its absence was obvious. However, the trusting Wayland never suspected the thief. He immediately thought of his wife. She must have returned and taken it. She knew he had been making it for her. He was overjoyed at the thought of seeing his love again, and settled down to a quiet evening. With this happy thought, he soon fell asleep. On waking the next morning, Wayland was shocked to find himself bound hand and foot, with several burly men standing over him, wearing the insignia of the Swedish royal house. To his further surprise, he was not their only captive. Egil had returned, empty-handed from his quest, that very night, and had been promptly set upon outside the lodge. Struggling was useless. The two were carried off at once. In the great hall of the Swedish royal palace, Wayland was confronted by Emilius, the Swedish royal smith. Nidus appeared and introduced them both. "I wish you to become my new goldsmith and jeweller," the king explained. "But Emilius here has some objections. Why don't you fight it out amongst yourselves?" Wayland was thrown his faithful sword, Mimung, and quickly found himself embroiled in a sword fight, in which he wanted no part. Nidus had no intention of letting Emilius win the fight, but with Wayland's skilful swordsmanship there was little chance of that. The Swedish smith soon lay dead at Wayland's feet. Taking his sword from his hand, the king congratulated Wayland on his victory. He began to prattle to the bemused goldsmith, laying out some of his plans for Wayland's future in royal service. "And I'll put a stop to any ideas of escape," laughed the king, bringing Wayland's own sword. On the back of his right leg he sliced through the hamstrings. Wayland cried out in pain and collapsed, blood pouring from the wound. Egil helped him up, and the two were led away. Wayland was thrown into a deep cave on the island of Severstout, which was to become his workshop. While Egil was employed elsewhere in the royal household, the divine smith was determined, however, that his immortal life was not going to be wasted toiling for the pleasure of the mere human. He began to plot his revenge. Wayland snuck off his island prison one night to see his brother. He asked Egil to fashion him a pair of wings, which would enable him to escape from Niduf's evil clutches. Poor Egil knew it would be dangerous. With Wayland's crippled leg, it would be his only chance. He managed to secretly capture some wild birds, and with their feathers did exactly as his brother had asked. Meanwhile, Wayland lured the king's two sons to his cave. It was not difficult, even though all were forbidden to visit him. The boys were fascinated by his magical art, and could not resist a peek. Demanding the keys to the chests which stood around the forge, the princes were dazzled by the jewelry found within. Wayland saw greed in their eyes, and he determined on a plan. He told the two boys that the contents of the chest could all be theirs if they would return to the cave in secrecy. Later that evening, this they eagerly did, but Wayland was ready with newly forged sword. When they entered his abode, he swung his weapon and chopped both their heads clean off. This was not the end, however. Carefully, Wayland stripped their bones and began a loathsome task which was to take him all night. Using the richest gold and jewels, he turned the young prince's skulls into two beautiful goblets. Their eyes he crafted into marvelous gems, and with their teeth he fashioned a sparkling collar of pearls. What was left of the bodies he buried under a dung heap. On the morrow, Wayland sought an audience with the king, at which he presented him with his finest work yet. The goblets he gave to King Nideth, the jewels he gave to the queen, and the pearls to Princess Behilda. The unsuspecting ladies wore their new baubles with pride, and the king put the goblets to use at once. By nightfall, the princes had been missed, and search parties were organized to scour the countryside for them. Wayland smiled to himself. It was time to make his getaway. His thoughts were interrupted, however, by the entrance of Princess Behilda to his forge. Her curiosity had been aroused by Wayland's gift, and she wished to get a glimpse of more of his treasures. Furthermore, she had broken the gold ring which her father had given her. He already had enough on his plate with her brother's disappearance, and she had hoped Wayland could mend the ring before King Nidus found out it was damaged. Recognizing the item at once as the ring he made for his wife, Wayland suddenly saw red. The extent of his jailer's tyranny flared in his mind, and he wanted further revenge. Promised to mend the ring so well that no one would ever know it had been broken. Then, sitting Behilda down, he drugged her with a cup of wine and maliciously raped her. Then he fled his island prison to seek his brother. Collecting his wings, Wayland thanked Egil and wished him well in his own attempts at escape. Then off he flew into the sky. Before leaving Sweden for good, he had one last piece of business to attend to. He headed to the king's palace, where he flew low over the great hall, taunting Nideth with jeers about his children's fate, to which he added the final humility that Behilda was with child. His child. Then he disappeared up into the clouds. Wayland flew far and wide, and eventually came to rest across the North Sea in Britain. He landed on the high downs in Berkshire, where he discovered an ancient chambered tomb which he named his home. It was here that Merlin commissioned him to make the great Excalibur for King Arthur himself. He lives there still. If you are ever riding the Ridgeway and your horse happens to lose a shoe, take him to the old tomb, Wayland's smithy, in Ashbury, and leave a suitable offering on the uppermost stone, traditionally a silver sixpence, with the horse tethered nearby. If you leave discreetly, on your return your horse will be shod and the money gone. Wayland will never work while being watched. As the old smith has been kept busy over the years shoeing horses in this manner, he often runs low on nails. On one such occasion he was obliged to send his apprentice, an imp called Flibbertigibbet down to the Vale with the White Horse to buy new stock. Like most lads, however, he dawdled, and, looking down from the Ridgeway, Wayland saw him stop to go bird nesting. Furious at his pupil for having no sense of responsibility, he picked up a large rock and hurled it after the little imp. The stone caught the boy on the heel, and he fell to the ground. Pulling himself up again, Flibbertigibbet sat down on the rock. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he began to cry bitterly. The impression of the lad's heel was left on the stone, and today the place where the tearful apprentice sat is known as Snivelling's Corner. Wayland has far more onerous duties than shoeing the horses of the passing travellers to keep him busy, though. The great white horse which graces the hillside at Uffington is the magnificent Grani, shod by Wayland for the Norse hero Sigurd, and now frozen in chalk. However, every 100 years the white horse awakens. It jumps down from its usual home and thunders across the sky to Wayland's smithy, where the divine smith is compelled to repeat his task and shoe the horse once more. This apparently last happened in about 1920. So yeah, that was the story of Wayland the Smith, and he is by far not the only story that is connected to him. He is involved in some other stories. He's meant to have a son as well. Maybe that's a story that we can look into another time. But yes, Wayland is certainly sort of a pivotal, sort of essential figure in British mythology. He's very well known, and he's sort of around in lots of other places as well in Europe. And this story is clearly very old, and we have some material evidence of that. The picture you can see on the screen is of the Frank's casket, and that has the story of Wayland the Smith on it. And that was found in that was from the 7th century. It's a very elaborate chest, and it was found in 1857 in France, and some people were just using it to keep stuff in, actually, I think. But it's very old. It's from the 7th century, and he is important enough to be depicted on a very ornamental piece of artwork. So we have in the Volundakvida, one of the poems of the 13th century Icelandic Elder or Poetic Edda, as variations in the mid-13th century Icelandic prose Thrydric saga. He's also mentioned in the Anglo-Saxon poems Valdera and Deor in Beowulf, and he has like a note inserted by Alfred the Great into his 9th century translation of Boethius. So he's mentioned in a lot of well-known epics, and of course he is said in the story to be half god. Lynx, you have probably come across Wayland before, possibly in Scandinavia. Is he? I believe he is known in Scandinavia, right?
I haven't heard of him actually. But then I was never really told any stories of Smiths and everything. It was always kept more to the broader lines of the Viking area. Era.
Yes.
So this is the first I have come across him. But
apparently he does have a
find
few
it
mentions.
interesting that.
Mm-hmm.
I do find it interesting. I find it interesting that he had his apprenticeship in Iceland and the dwarves. That is not anything I was expecting really. From an English dude?
No, like, he seems to have been not at all English originally. Seems to have migrated over, and after having trouble in his home country, I think he was apprenticed to the dwarfs, and according to what I've looked at, his father Wade was killed in a landslide when coming to get him. So then he goes over to Sweden and is in Sweden at the time of that story. And they sort of, like, he's definitely half divine, and his father Wade, his father is sort of, earliest sort of mention of him is in the Old English poem Widsith, and he was born between a king called Wilkinus and a mermaid. But he's actually kind of a god. And he was meant to be the keeper of the ford and acted as a ferryman and a protector, so he seems to have death associations here. Like, we got Chaucer referring to the tale of Wade in one of his works, and he used the phrase Wade's boat, meaning some sort of trickery in the merchant's tale. And, we have sort of references to Wade's boat among the angles and stuff, so Wayland is definitely of a significant lineage. And
I would think so.
And it is mentioned, of course, repeatedly in the story that he is immortal, and that he's sort of like blessed with divine powers. But yeah, the actual plot of the story itself, I thought it was a lot to do with fate. Because the first thing I really noticed about it was that they come across these 3 women in the woods, and what are the 3 women doing? Well, they're spinning. And of course we have seen that before. We've seen that before, that spinning is associated with, especially if it's a group of 3 women, it's associated with them being the Fates. So I thought that was very interesting that they seem to have found the Fates in the forest, who are also swan ladies. And now if you look at swans, they've got quite mixed symbolism. They're very ambiguous. They're sort of light, death, transformation, poetry, beauty, melancholy, passion. And, death, because of course they're supposed to have that beautiful song that they sing before they die. But also, like, they are associated with the other world, and that's particularly in Celtic cultures, which I think it would be fair to say would have influence on the Anglo-Saxons. I do think it'd be fair to say that they would. And what it is that swans in Celtic mythology, they do tend to draw the Celtic bark of the sun. So they're a pair of swans, and they have a gold or silver chain drawing the boat that carries the sun. So they are responsible for the literal continuance of life. And they're very heavily associated with the other world. So I think that does support my sort of theory that Wayland has definitely met the Fates, the Norns, and he and his brothers there have sort of tamed them temporarily. Of course, we know it's temporarily. You can't exactly go around getting on top of the Fates, having them kept to your own whims. It's not how that works, and of course that isn't how it works out for our Wayland. But I was very intrigued by the name of the woman he married. Now, Lynx, I don't know, you might have heard that one, because where I remember that one from is from the Poetic Edda, and that saga in which Thor and a dwarf are having this sort of... Thor is grilling this dwarf for a whole bunch of knowledge. Thor is asking him a bunch of questions because this dwarf wants to marry Thor's daughter. And so he's asking him all sorts of questions, like, oh, do you know the name of the clouds in all of the worlds, and the name of the sun in all of the worlds? And just a whole bunch of stuff like that. And I found it very odd, because I've heard All Wise. I'm sure I've heard it in reference to Odin as well. But mostly I've heard of it in reference, in the sort of Edda and the sagas, to males. Alvis.
What was the name again?
So All Wise, they put it in this tale. I think if one was to say it in perhaps Old English or Old Norse, it would be Alvis that was the name. But they say All Wise in this version.
Yeah, we do have names that are similar to that. One very old name is Haldis. That is a female name. That is the first one to come to my mind, but and we have Alva.
Alva does sound quite a bit like it. Alva, All Wise, Alvis. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is of course also tied to the elves. And for the male names, we have just a simple Alv. There's basically just elf.
Yeah. So that can be associated with women. Yeah.
Yeah, it can. Many of those names have a male version and a female version of it. And with females, it often gets the added Ds or Es at the end. So it definitely sounds Germanic or, like Old Norse.
Yeah, and I think the two languages would certainly be related. They share practically a whole mythology. There's a lot of crossover, indeed. I will try and tweet or Telegram sort of share Alvesmal if anybody does want to read that particular saga about Thor versus Dwarf. It's just a bit of a question off, really. But yeah, they've prevented the Fates from leaving by stealing their bird thorns. So presumably the parts of them that are able to flee away into the other world. And again, we have that reference to birds being able to go between worlds. Birds being not of the mortal world. The fairy tales definitely all think that there's something suspicious about the birds. But that obviously doesn't last long. They do manage to get their bird forms back, and they're away as suddenly as they came. Now, what I notice about Wayland in this situation, that he isn't chasing his wife, he's not chasing fate. And instead, he stays behind and sort of earns greatness through perseverance. Which I think shows an acceptance on his part, is that your fate is one thing, then it is that thing. You can't really do much in the way of changing it. And I think there's that attitude throughout Indo-European tales of meeting fate and what it has in store for you with dignity, as opposed to explicitly trying to change it.
Yeah.
He has trust that whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and he's thinking his wife will, his wife will come back, his fate will come back, and he's not actively trying to seek glory. It just sort of is his destiny. So I think that's, I don't know what you think about that sort of idea.
Well, it does seem like he tried to challenge his fate at the earlier moment when he encountered the fates in the wood. And then he learned his lesson and decided to make his best out of it, what he had. But he had realized that he could not change it. And what he could change was what he did with it. So I would definitely say that he learned his lesson there. So that is definitely an element in the story of, where we see that the character has learned.
Yeah,
and
I
it's
think
not
so.
just implied.
I think what Wayland also reminded me of was the Golden Goose, kind of. In that he produces magical stuff just sort of automatically. And there's obviously someone in this story,
Yeah.
King Nideth, who actually wants to possess him. And if he can't have him, then of course nobody else is having Wayland. You get the impression that King Nideth would rather destroy everything that Wayland has to offer.
I came across the theory. I didn't have time to look it up more, but it was suggested that a village smith in Scandinavia might be crippled because he was such a valuable person, so that he wouldn't go and offer his services to another village. I've not heard of that before, so I can't say anything of the validity of it. But
no, I've never heard of anyone doing that with smiths before. And it seems to have been put in this story to indicate just how extreme King Nideth is. So it may or may not have validity to it, but I can see why you wouldn't want your smith running away. I can see why. Certainly.
Yeah, I also came across the theory that smiths were sort of an outcast in their village. That they didn't live within the village, but a slight distance outside of it, and that they were not the most popular people. I don't know the validity of that either, but
well, also that tends to happen to be linked to profession oftentimes. I mean, tanners and stuff. They were chucked out of the city in medieval times too because their work was stinky, and I'd suppose that similarly a smith's work was noisy, and clangy and smoky. So they may have been chucked out of the village. For that sort of reason.
That was my thinking as well, that it wasn't due to a mistrust of the smith himself, but related to what the profession brought with it. And also saying that you have a bunch of horses that comes in for shoeing at the same time. It might be a bit crowded with horses there. So then you might prefer to have them outside of the village for a time. And also, when you look at the old blacksmith gods of Europe, they are usually they usually make, the famous weapons and shields and helmets and everything. But they are kindly men. They are a friend of humans and often very peaceful, actually. So,
Yeah, it's true. They're often
yeah,
seen
I
as quite
do
jovial.
think, yeah. So I don't really think that they were badly looked upon back in the day.
No, not being skilled and good enough to make all this stuff for the community. I doubt they would have been incredibly, frowned upon. I can't see that really
except
being
if
the
they
case.
had a bad character.
And yeah,
If they were a bad person, then maybe.
certainly, Nidda's actions are supposed to be reprehensible. His name actually indicates that he's a bad dude, probably. Because D is usually a replacement for a thorn rune, which looks like a P, kind of, which is actually a th sound. And Nithus, it sort of seems like it has a relation to the word nithing, which is an old Middle English word for villain, cowardly. And there's also a king called Nithad who actually keeps coming up as the bad guy in a lot of Scandinavian and Anglo-Saxon stories.
Yeah, it does remind me of
yeah.
Need from Nidhogg. You know that the first part there is basically identical. So
Yes, it is.
And he was quite feared.
Yeah, Nidhogg was feared and also was generally regarded as disgusting as well. So
Yeah.
he's clearly he can't even wait for the person he's about to kidnap to come back from getting some bear for his supper, apparently. Which I suppose that's just there to emphasize Waylon's strength. Like, look at this dude. He's eating bear for tea. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so of course him trying to possess literal divine power when he's unworthy in the form of Wayland ends in predictably the complete and utter annihilation of his line because his sons are gone and his daughter, in what Wayland has done to her, is now completely unmarriageable because she has been deflowered and she is pregnant. So she's not actually marriageable, and thus trying to possess Wayland like that has resulted in the complete destruction of this unworthy king's line. And then, Wayland, similar to the Fates, he's just a pure force of something, of power, not necessarily goodness, because we can see that he has a capacity to be very brutal when roused to it by wrongdoing, but he is sort of ascends out of there from his wings that his brother has made him into the heavenly sort of realm.
Yeah. That is interesting.
And the rest of that really was just these interesting tidbits about Wayland. I mean, I wouldn't try leaving your horse unattended necessarily at Wayland's smithy. I mean, I dare say that maybe a few horse thieves took advantage of that one back in the day.
Yeah, that
probably
might
got a
be
free
the
coin.
Case, as long as they
free coin and a horse out of it. Oh
yeah,
dear.
Well, as long as they had had all their shoes.
I mean, if anybody can get a horse and a coin, and we can ever get to Wayland's smithy, maybe it's a Hearth of Europa live experiment time. Does it work? Is the legend true?
I would prefer to keep the horses safe at the hearth.
Yep. Oh dear. No, probably don't test that hypothesis with your best thoroughbred.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, very interesting one that, and of course, people have obviously kept Wayland around in the local legend for ages. I mean, there's a story of him coming into a local pub, ordering a drink, having to run off to shoe the white horse, and then the next day, they're like, oh, who was that weird guy in the pub with the limp? And the horse's feet look particularly shiny, which is another little one about Wayland in the local Berkshire area. It's very cool. And there's also a site related to Wayland in Sweden, at Välleby in Jutland. There's some large stones in Sissebeck, and that's said to be Wayland's burial place. So I don't know how he got back over to Sweden, if he's still hanging around in Britain. But that's what they say anyway. But yeah.
Well, maybe he never left in a Swedish version of it.
Perhaps he did.
Maybe they
never
made
leave.
maybe they made their king their hero instead, and Wayland had to stay and eventually died.
Yeah, could do. I mean, it keeps saying immortal here, and I don't know if he's like literally immortal or lives a very long time. So if Wayland died, I think he would have had to have been killed somehow. But we can look into. I think I can perhaps look into other Wayland stories because I'm curious. He seems to have a continuing saga ongoing about him. We have one last story. That is yours, isn't it, Lynx?
Yes, it is, and I'm going to read that live, as my audio editing did take a bit longer than I thought, so I didn't have it ready in time. This is also quite a traditional story. It is probably very old, and the version I have probably has been rewritten to suit Christianity. And I do have a bit to say when we're done with it. So this is the smith they dare not let into hell. Once, in the days that our Lord and Saint Peter went and walked the earth, they came to a smith. He had made a contract with the devil that he should belong to him in 7 years, against being the master of all master smiths during that time, and both he and the devil had signed names to that contract. He had therefore placed in great letters above the smithy door, "Here lives the master of all masters." When our Lord came and saw this, he went in. "Who are you?" he said to the smith. "Read above the door," replied the smith. "But perhaps you cannot read writing, so you will have to wait until one comes who can help you." Before our Lord could answer him, a man with a horse came, which he asked the smiths to shoe for him. "May I not be allowed to shoe him?" asked our Lord. "You may try," said the smith. "You cannot make it worse than I can make it right again." Our Lord went out and took one leg off the horse, laid it in the smith's furnace, and made the shoe glow. Then he trimmed and rasped the hoof and dressed the nails, and then he put the leg, whole and complete, back onto the horse. When he had done this, he took the other foreleg and did the same. When he had put that one back on again too, he took the rear legs, first the right, then the left, laid them in the furnace, made the shoes glow, trimmed and rasped the hoof, and dressed the nails, and put the leg back on the horse again. All the while the smith stood watching him. "You are not such a bad smith, you," he said. "Is that what you think?" said the Lord. A little while after, a wife came to the smithy and bade him come home to eat dinner. She was old and fragile, terribly crooked in her back, and wrinkled of face, and had trouble walking. "Pay attention to what you now see," said our Lord. Wife laid her in the smith's furnace, and smith a beautiful young maiden from her. "I say now, as I have said the smith. You are not a half bad smith. It says, 'Here lives the master of all masters above my door,' but I will say it straight out. No, one learns as long as one lives." And with that, he went up to the farm to eat dinner. When he returned to the smithy again, a man came riding, who would have his horse shod. "It will soon be done," said the smith. "I have just learned a new way of shoeing. It is good to use when the days are short." And so he began to cut and wrestle, so long as it took to get all the horse's legs off. "For I don't know what it is good for, to go fiddling with one by one," he said. The legs he laid in the smith's furnace, and as he had seen our Lord do, laid cook carefully on them, and had the smithy boys work the bellows swiftly. But it went as he might expect. The legs burned up, and the smith had to pay for the horse. He did not think much of that. But straightway there came a poor old woman walking past, and so he thought, although one thing did not work, the other will. And he took the woman and laid her in the furnace. It did not help, however much she wept and begged for her life. "You do not know what is best for you, as old as you are," said the smith. "Now you shall be a young maiden again, in a moment, and even so I will not take as much as a shilling for it for the smithing." Things went no better with the woman, the poor thing, than with the horse's legs. "That was poorly done," said our Lord. "Oh, there are not so many who will ask after her," replied the smith. "But the shame is the devil, for he keeps not what is written above the door." "If you could have 3 wishes for me," said our Lord, "what would you wish for then?" "Try me," replied the smith, "and then you might dare to know." Our Lord gave him 3 wishes. "Then first and foremost, I wish the one I tell to climb up into the pear tree that stands out here by the smithy wall must remain there until I myself tell him to come down again," said the smith. "Secondly, I wish that the one I tell to sit in the armchair that is in the workshop must remain sitting there until I ask him to get up again. And finally, I wish that the one whom I ask to crawl into this steel wire pouch I have in my pocket will stay there until I myself give him permission to crawl out again." "You wish as a bad man," said Saint Peter. "First and foremost, you should have wished for God's grace and favor." "I dare not aim so high," said the smith. Then our Lord and Saint Peter bade him farewell and went on their way. Time drew slowly on, and when the time was ripe, the devil came, as it said in the contract, and would fetch the smith. "Are you finished now?" he said, as he poked his nose in through the smithy doorway. "Oh, I would very much like to strike a head on this nail first," said the smith. "You climb into the pear tree and pick a pear to gnaw on in the meantime. I expect you are both hungry and thirsty after your journey." The devil thanked him for such an offer and climbed the tree. "Well, when I consider again," said the smith, "well, I won't be able to strike a head on this nail this next 4 years, for the iron is so damn hard. You cannot come down in that time, so you may sit and rest yourself until then." The devil begged and pleaded as thinly as a florin that he might come down again, but it helped not. Finally, he had to promise that he would not return until the 4 years had passed, as the smith had said. Then you may come down again," said the smith. Now, when the time was up, the devil returned to fetch the smith. Now you must be finished, he said. Now I am sure you can have struck the head on the nail. Yes, I have the head on it, replied the smith. But you have still come a bit early, for for I, for I have not sharpened the point yet. I've never smit such a hard iron before. While I strike the point on the nail, you can sit in my armchair and rest, for you are tired, I imagine. Thank you for the offer, said the devil, sitting in the armchair. But before he had rested, then the smith said again that he had considered that he would not be able to sharpen the point in the next 4 years. The devil began by asking politely to be able to rise from the chair, and then he grew angry and began threatening. But the smith excused himself as best he could, and said that the iron was at fault in this, for it was so damn hard. And he comforted the devil by pointing out how comfortably he sat in the armchair, and that in 4 years he would be released on the very minute. There was no reply other than that the devil had promised that he would not come and fetch the smith before the 4 years had passed, and then the smith said, "Well then, you can get up again." And the smith set off, and the devil set off as quickly as he could. After 4 years, the devil returned again to fetch the smith. "Now you are finished, I know," said the devil, sticking his nose in through the smithy doorway. "Completely finished," replied the smith. "Now we can travel when you will." "But listen," he said. "There is something I stood here for a long time thinking about, and I thought I would ask you about it. Is it true what they say, that the devil may make himself as small as he will?" "Of course it is true," replied the devil. "Oh, in that case, would you do me the favor of crawling into the steel wire pouch and tell me if there is a hole in the bottom?" said the smith. "I don't want to lose my traveling money." "My pleasure," said the devil. He made himself small and crawled into the pouch, but not before the devil was in. Then the smith snapped it closed. "Yes, it is whole and tight everywhere," said the devil in the pouch. "Yes, this is good enough that you tell me," replied the smith. "But it is better to be safe rather than sorry. I think I had better weld the seams a little more, just to be on the safe side," he said. And with that, he put the pouch in the furnace and made it glow. "Oh, ow! Are you insane? Don't you know I am in here?" shouted the devil. "Yes, but I cannot help you," said the smith, "for I must, according to the proverb, strike while the iron is hot." And so he took his big sledgehammer, laid the pouch on the anvil, and pounded it with all his might. "Ow, ow, ow!" shrieked the devil in the pouch. "Dear me, let me come out again, and I will never return again." "Well, yes, I believe those seams are properly welded now," said the smith. "You may come out again." And then he opened the pouch, and the devil went off so quickly that he dared not even look behind himself. But a little while later, it occurred to the smith that he had done himself a bad turn by making an enemy of the devil. "For should I not come into the kingdom of God," he thought, "there is a danger that I would have nowhere to go, since I am an enemy of the one who rules over hell." He thought it best to try to come either into hell or into heaven, and sooner rather than later, so he might know where he stood. And so he slung his big sledgehammer over his shoulder and went on his way. When he had gone a good way, he came to the crossroads, where the way to heaven separates from that which goes to hell. There he caught up with a tailor friend who was shuffling off with his pressing iron in his hand. "Good day," said the smith. "Where are you going?" "To heaven, if I may come in there," replied the tailor. "How about you?" "Oh, I don't think we shall accompany one another for long," replied the smith. "I am going to try hell first, for I know the devil a little from before." So they said farewell, and each went on his way. But the smith was a vigorous fellow and went much more quickly than the tailor, and it was not long before he stood before the gate of hell. He asked the guard to announce that there was one without the gate who would speak to the devil. Go out and ask who it is, said the devil to the guard, and he did so. Greet the devil and tell him that it is the man who had the pouch that he is sure to know, replied the man, and ask him ever so politely if I may come in straight away. For I've been over my anvil until dinner, and I've since walked this long way. When the devil received the message, he commanded the guard to lock all 9 gates to the gate of hell. And set an extra padlock too, said the devil, for if he comes in, he will cause trouble all through hell. There is no salvation to be had here, said the smith to himself, when he understood that they were securing the gate more. So I should try heaven then. And with that, he turned and went back to the crossroads again, and there he took the road the tailor had taken. As he was now angry on account for the long distance he had gone forth and back again for nothing, he hurried all he could and reached the gate as St. Peter opened the crack so that the tailor friend could squeeze himself in. The smith was still 67 paces from the gate. It is best to hurry, he thought, took hold of his sledgehammer and threw it into the crack of the gate as the tailor squeezed through. But if it did not get through that crack, then I do not know what became of him. Okay, so
ambiguous
that
ending.
was my story. And as I'm sure you heard, it definitely have flavors of The Boy and the Devil. Both of them are trapping the devil into a small confinement. And then they have that small confinement hammered with the great sledgehammer. So I definitely think the one grew out from the other.
It does seem like it. It does seem like an elaboration, or you never know whether the more complicated one came first or the more simple one was a simplification of it. But they do seem to be interrelated, certainly.
Yeah, I would guess that The Boy and the Devil came after, as that is a short story, and I think the longer story is definitely based on something much older. And as we saw, it is definitely adapted to Christianity with our Lord and Saint Peter in it, and also the devil.
Yes, that
And I
is
would
definitely.
say that the Smith in this story, yeah, I would definitely say the Smith is very ambiguous person. You don't really know if he is good or bad, or if it just is a bit self-centered. centered. So
I mean, certainly when he does the same actions that the Lord tried to do, with regards to fixing the horse, fixing the lady, he's not asking money for it. He's not trying to use those sort of things that he's been demonstrated for material gain. So they do go wrong for him, but he's not trying to do bad when he does them. Certainly. So I'm not sure why he thought he could.
It's definitely an element of pride in there. In that he thinks he can do it simply because he has this deal with the devil, and it doesn't seem like he realized that he is trying to do what God does.
Yeah, and the devil explicitly cannot do that. The devil has never created anything.
No, exactly. So, and good evening, offensive username. Um,
Indeed, good evening.
yeah. Um, I do find it interesting that he then thinks, oh, I might not get into heaven or hell by doing this. And if not, I guess he would be damned to walk the earth as a ghost.
Yeah, walk the earth. I don't know, maybe purgatory, limbo is maybe a concept here for him. That he would get stuck in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the end of the story, we don't actually know if he gets into heaven. So he might have ended in purgatory.
No, they
or
left it
limbo.
on a cliffhanger. Just like, can you
Yeah,
get away with
definitely.
throwing a hammer into the gates of heaven? I would say probably no. I'm not sure you could
No.
really do one over on the god or the gods or whoever's heaven you're getting into like that.
Yeah, well, it definitely shows how he wasn't going to come into heaven because um, he was fairly confident that he would be let in. Then why toss the sledgehammer? Why sneak himself in after the tailor using a sledgehammer of all things? So
I know. I don't know. Like I like how
yeah,
he goes to hell first, and he's like, "Oh, okay, fine. Don't let me in then. Fine, I'll just go to heaven." And he's almost like annoyed that he has to
yeah,
do that. It's like, for goodness sake, I'm having to walk back the exact opposite way to which I came. Thank you for wasting my time. I could have really brought some innovative things to hell, but if you won't have me, fine.
yeah.
He's just like, yeah. But I can
Yeah, he is
understand.
a bit cocky. um,
Yeah, I can understand why the devil doesn't really want him in there. Doesn't really do your images management really any good if you have someone who's already flagrantly undermined you.
Yeah, I definitely hope that he learned his lesson that he couldn't take the legs off the horse for other horses that they would shoe. Otherwise, you might not be the
Yeah,
most popular smith to
I
take your horse to. So again, we get that element of horseshoes.
mean that was brutal. Like you were like
Yeah,
especially when it got to the lady bit, you were just like, oh no, oh no,
yeah.
nope, it's gonna be crispy roast old lady. Oh dear.
Yeah, sort of a facepalm moment. Just, oh no, don't do that, please. Oh no, he did it.
Oh dude,
So,
that was someone's gran. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, but no one's going to miss her, so never mind.
I can see why he's a lot more suited for
Um,
hell. He seems like a little bit of a
yeah,
sociopath. Just a tad.
yeah, somewhat. Yeah, a little drop of that perhaps. Um, I've already mentioned the Smiths tie to the line of Cain. So here I think I was thinking I would mention some of the older versions, at least in Europe, when it comes to Smiths. And what really stood out to me with this tale is Hephaestus, the smithing god of the Greeks.
Yes. Yeah, so tell us a bit
Because
about
there
his
are
feast.
some yeah, very quite a few interesting connections there. First of all, the name. It's not known what it means, but it is similar to the pre-Greek toponyms, Phaistos. I'm sorry because I'm sure I'm butchering these names and Greek phrases. It is not my strong suit, but
It's essentially how I feel every time I have to say something Scandinavian. I'm like, oh no.
yeah. Yeah. Well, you can always ask me. But as Phaistos is pre-Greek, it denotes the possibility that Hephaestus is a very old deity. And he was the child of Hera and Zeus, and in some versions only Hera. In that version, Hera created Hephaestus as a revenge to Zeus for creating Athena, because he created Athena by himself. And Hephaestus was, in this version, born with a deformity, so she threw him away. And in the versions where he is a child of Zeus and Hera, it is Zeus who tosses him from Olympus and down to Earth. And he, in that, I think both versions, he lands on the Earth and survives that, but he is crippled. And he lands on an island and is raised there.
I see.
And when he's a youth,
So we got isolated, crippled Smiths on islands again.
Yeah, and he doesn't know who he is. And there he learns the art of smithing and the craftsmanship that he is later to be known for. And he catches the attention of the gods because of that, and so learns who he is. And then he is returned to Olympus. But he's not very happy with his mother, you could say. So he makes a golden throne for her. And she loves it immediately and sits down. But what no one else can see is that there is invisible ties on the chair. So she isn't able to rise again. And that I found very interesting in this story because it's so similar to tying the devil to the chair in the smithy. And the only way she could be released was that is one version of how Hephaestus married Aphrodite, actually. In that Zeus married her off to him in exchange for setting Hera free. And the only one could make him do that was Dionysus, and he did it by getting him drunk. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's certainly an interesting parallel there with the being tied to a chair thing. Yes.
Yeah.
And it seems like,
and
I'm not sure Greece and Anglo-Saxon England necessarily had much contact either. So it does seem very old indeed.
Well,
yes.
this is a Scandinavian, sorry. This is a Scandinavian version, so it does point to a very old tie, I would say. There was some trade, but we don't really know how much it was way back in the day. But it is possible that they have the same origin from when several groups started to split off.
It certainly is, and I think we should certainly at a future date talk more about this anthropology sort of stuff. Definitely. And the sort of methods used to find out the oldest stories.
Yeah.
Because I know that's something we were discussing, and then looking at looking at having, maybe trying to find a guest for or something like that. So
Yeah, that would
hopefully
be
we
very
shall.
interesting.
Hopefully we shall look at that
Yeah,
a bit more. But
yeah, I definitely hope so. But another very interesting tie is that some say that at the request of Zeus, he also sculpted the first mortal woman, which just happened to be Pandora.
oh, yes, Pandora and the box,
So,
which is not a womb. Definitely not a womb metaphor.
yeah, definitely not. Or maybe it depends on the womb, I don't know.
I know, it's
But it
just like,
definitely,
it's a very man story, isn't it? She had this like womb, she had, and then we had sex, and then suddenly it was just chaos, to be honest. But then the one good thing in
yeah,
Pandora's box is hope. So I guess they do give the metaphorical continuation of humanity there. That.
yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's
Yeah,
what comes with the fall, really.
yeah. Speaking of the fall, I've also seen this story tied to Adam and Eve, and that the devil is, the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and they gain mortality, and then that circle is brought to a finish with Jesus, and as such achieving immortal life. So it has also been tied to this story, which is quite interesting.
That is interesting indeed. You get a lot across the religions and across the cultures that just seems to be very innate. But I didn't know they tied that story to
Yeah.
Adam and Eve. Yeah.
Um, I did find one video about it, so it might be his own thoughts on it that he immediately thought of Adam and Eve. But I'm not sure if it is more of a scholarly theory about that, but it's definitely interesting.
It's an interesting one to put out there, yeah. So,
Yeah.
that was indeed our last story for tonight. And we hope you've enjoyed the stories about Smiths and Devils. We hope you've learned some more about the Smith and Devil archetype. The mic is breaking up. Well, we are about to finish up for today. And we are just probably going to distribute the lemons now.
Yeah.
So yes.
Open that chest.
Yes, open the chest. Put lemons in the chest. Let's do 100 lemons in the chest. Submit. Put them in the chest. So. Right. Now we can distribute the rewards. Who's going to get lemons? Oh, thank you for the follow, Kitty B. Oh. Everybody's anticipating lemons. Who gets lemons? Hey! It's Timmy Bobinson. Timmy Bobinson's got lemons. Probably got the most of the lemons with 47.3. And then Dish Rag. You've got 27.6 lemons. Along with Zed the Board. who got 20.2, and Katie B got 16.2 lemons. There was 111
Congratulations.
lemons on D-Live. Right, I don't really know how they allocate the lemons, Timmy. Oh, thank you for the ice cream. Yeah, they just seem to like they give it out, however they kind of want to. You were chatting quite a bit though. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. Winners, enjoy your lemons. Like you sort of look at it and it's like you kind of wonder how much it is in real money. You have to times it by 12 cents American. Oh, yes, thank you to 1690 Sparky. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
We're glad you enjoyed it. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I do hope that everyone has had a good evening with us tonight. And
indeed. We'll probably put a
hopefully we
time.
will see you again.
Oh, we'll probably put a timestamp
What?
to skip. We should put a timestamp to skip that small moment of silence that there would be in the comments or something for the replay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Okay. I hope you have a good evening, and hopefully we will see you again next Sunday.
Bye.
And have a great week, everyone.
Yeah, we hope you've had a wonderful weekend. Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.